All right, I'll get there eventually. You are so blessed to have a wonderful, gracious, kind, and humble pastor like this man. I've known him since, I'm telling you, and his wife too. I've known him since he was knee-high to a duck. And he's grown in grace, and look what grace has grown to be here. And I've known his daddy. Daddy and we had a lot of wonderful times together. And his daddy's friends, they always did. It'd be the second coming now if they were still alive. They just did so many wonderful things. Thank you so much for having me. And I always leave here thinking, when can I come back? Because I just enjoy it. That much. David and I, we get together quite a bit on Wednesday, on Thursdays, and for a hot dog, and we share thoughts and share things that are precious to us. Now I want to focus on a passage of Scripture and give several observations about it from the book of Philippians, the 7th book in the New Covenant, when the writer, Paul, who was a gracious person himself, said, "Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things." About 2 years ago, Connie Maxwell got a new CEO. Danny Nicholson and his wife Deborah came and took over the reins, and they have done a wonderful job. My grandson works there, and so I get a first-hand report on the good things happening at Connie Maxwell constantly. In fact, I had the opportunity to be at the first big meal that they had after Danny came. It wasn't for him, it was for a group of people who came from Columbia, from Shandon Baptist Church, to take part in a new building project at Connie Maxwell. Men and women just talented and skilled and willing and committed to doing that. And at the end of the day, they were looking for a place in Greenwood that was big enough to house about 90 people for a meal. Now, they found a place finally. It was next door to the sports break place. It's a good place, and it's a good food, and it was well done. My daughter, who was a member of Shandon, was responsible for making the arrangements, and she had the wisdom to put me at the head table. Now, I often get at the head table at banquets and anniversaries and big meals, not because I deserve it or earn it or merit it in any way, but because I can pray. And they need somebody to pray to ask the blessing. And so for that reason, I get at more head tables than anybody else in town. In fact, Danny was there. Deborah was here, his wife. I was here. My daughter was there. And there were several dignitaries. This was just a gathering. It had been planned as a meal. It had been planned as a work project. But it turned out to be quite an event. I had the privilege of introducing Danny to a lot of people that I've known at Connie Maxwell. I've preached there every year for years. When Doug Kaufman was the pastor of the church, Doug came to Connie Maxwell from the pastorate at McCormick and did a wonderful job. And every year in January, Doug said, "You got to preach the first sermon in January every year." Well, I worked it out okay with South Main. But he had his revival in January, and the kids, it was a good thing to do. But I enjoyed, through the years, knowing so many people. Ben Davis, who was CEO, is a member at South Main. I sit with him in Sunday school quite a lot, and his wonderful wife. So there we were, and people would come by and I'd say, "Well, Danny, this is Ben, or Danny, this is David, and one after another. And we chatted for about 30 minutes, and then they blew the whistle. It was time to eat, so everybody got up and went through the line, and all the food you could enjoy, and it was a wonderful meal. And we took our time enjoying it. And when it was over, the girls picked up some of the plates, and we had additional opportunity to share in the fellowship one with another. Well, Danny looked. He was almost helpless because people just kept coming. And I was enjoying introducing him and being that part of it. After about 30 minutes, the mood changed slightly. Danny slowed down, and he turned and he looked at me. And he said, Ryan, you've been preaching how long? I said, 72 years. It was 70 years in. I started when I was 18. So that's a long time to preach. I'm not going to preach all 72 sermons this morning. I got 8,000 of them. But he said, I've heard about your experiences here at Connie Maxwell. He said, I want you to do something for me. I said, okay, Danny, I'd be glad to do anything. I'm just a guest, And I said, okay, sure. He said, I want you to summarize your 70 years of ministry. Now, folks, if you want to get hit on the head by a hammer, you tell somebody to do something like that. It summarized 70 years of baptisms and revivals and funerals and weddings and banquets and all the things that went into the schooling and 20 years of school and all that. You want me to, of course I didn't respond that way. I just it was going on in my mind. I was saying, Lord, give me a word. Give me so. Then he said, I'm going to make it easy for you. Well, by this time, the people had subdued a little bit, and everybody was in on a conversation between me and Danny. He said, I want you to do it in one word. I said, he wants me to summarize 70 years of ministry in one word. Now, suppose I ask you to come up here and stand by me and summarize your life in one word. What would you say? I said, Lord, give me a word, Lord. I need a word. And for some unknown reason, the word that came to my mind was persistence. Oh, I like that, persistence. And everybody agreed, they that knew me and then knew my daughter and knew the word. That's good. Now, I have not used that word in 15 years. I use all the derivatives of it. It's don't quit. Don't stop. If you got a responsibility, do it. But don't give in, give up, give out, give away. And so I said persistence. And that sufficed. Thank God. Well, through the years, we accumulate a lot of things in our lifestyles that begin to identify us. And the fact that we ministers, more than probably than anybody else, sail a lot of ships on the sea of troubles. And we have seen the adversities that folks have had and dealt with them and shared with them and prayed with them and stayed at hospitals overnight and funerals and so many things. Sir Winston Churchill was my favorite hero. I was 11 years old when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and the war started. I was born in the middle of a depression. We didn't have a car, didn't have a telephone, we had a bicycle. And it had a refrigerator. I called it the ice box still because that's all we had. Not much. Didn't have any plug-ins, but it didn't make any difference because it didn't have anything to plug into plug-ins. We had one light came out of the ceiling, and it had a little chain on it. You could turn it on, and you turn it off, and that was it. That was the whole 9 yards. But it was quite a lifestyle that we had. But Winston Churchill, to me, became the hero of the Second World War because of his tenacity and because of his courage in the face of adversity. Sir Winston, when they pressured him to surrender to Hitler and not have a war but just yield. See, if he had done that, you and I would probably be speaking German. Winston said at Dunkirk, "No, we will fight him on the beaches. We will fight him in the air. We will fight him on the ground. We will not quit. We will win." Well, he somehow gathered up the strength of not only those around him, but those in other places as well. It's said a lot of things written about him. Some people have added things that, some things that just may be in the imagination. But I read one thing that Sir Winston was called upon to speak to his graduating class school, which was Eton, and to the remnants of those who might have been there, but to the graduates. He was the graduate speaker. And he got that feeble body that was then on its way out. I've been to his grave. He was buried not in Westminster Abbey, but he was buried in a little grave under a shade tree, and the church is in the background. That's where he wanted to be buried. I could touch his tombstone. Very humble and very simple. But Sir Winston's accepted very few things, but this was one of the last things he did, speaking to the graduating class at Eton. When he got to his remarks, he turned to the people on the right side, which were the guests and friends who had been invited by the boys and girls, men and women. These were guests. And he said, "And I say to you, boys, men and women, never give up." And then he turned to the people on the left-hand side, which were the mamas and the daddies, and the aunts and the uncles and the nieces and the nephews of the class. And after a dramatic pause, he said, "And I say to you, dear friends, never, never give up." Well, he was pretty well getting his point across by that time. And then he turned to the student body, the men and women who graduating, the future. And he said, "I say to you, our future and our hope for years to come, never, never, never give up." And he didn't. And he didn't. And many of them didn't. And got new strength to live because of the tenacity of a committed person who didn't give up. Now, one word. How can you summarize a life like his? I could do it in one word. There's some folks I know in town that say, "How could you say?" I say, I got a word for them. And the word that I would use to some folks I know and love dearly is they are Christ-led, Christ-committed. They were Christ dedicated. And these words in the book, it's in the book right here, when it says whatsoever things are true, and whatsoever things are just, and whatsoever things are lovely, and whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. That's a word. If a person lives like that, he is Christ appointed. He has a character that demonstrates itself. I know people I could identify with one word. Second observation I want to make out of the three observations I have on this passage of Scripture is that we have the faith of the power of the Lord. We have the persistence to live victoriously. The Bible tells us that there is a way that we can live that is well-pleasing in the sight of the Lord. Chapter 40, book of Isaiah, it's in the book right here. It says, comfort ye, my people. Saith God, speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, and cry unto her that her welfare is accomplished. Oh, it's wonderful. You know, I loved preaching positive sermons. I didn't always do that, but I loved doing it when I did it. Comfort ye, my people. God's people need to know that in this day of discomfort, and this day of scams, and this day of rioting, and this day of the evil that we see about us that is so prevalent. You know what happened when in 1931 and the years that followed that, in my early years in coming out of a depression, we were a close nation, and the reason we were, I think, was because of our faith, our fortitude, and our families. We had family commitments that we honored, and we had fortitude. People worked. People don't want to work today. And they had fortitude and they had faith, and they had their faith that they filled the churches and the pews and worshiped. It was a wonderful time. Revivals, Billy Graham's days, and before and after. There was a time in my lifetime when America was such a wonderfully knit place. We were one nation. But we started seeing the sin that became more and more prevalent. And what has happened is the further we get away from God, the more there is sin among us. Now, you mark it well, and it will get worse before it gets better. But what happened when there's a whole generation of people now that don't know the Lord? They've come up under the auspice of the dealers, the drug dealers and all those who make money scamming. I had 4 telephone calls this past month of somebody who was scamming me. It's real funny. The guy, I guess he forgot who it was. I answered the phone, and I don't answer it all the time now. I just don't. But I answered, and he said, "May I speak to Paul?" Well, there was no Paul in my house. And he wanted me to engage me in conversation. And I said, "No, thank you." But about a week later, he came and called me again. He said, "Can I speak to Paul?" I said, "No, Paul's still not here." But it's happened, and it's sad that it has happened. We have seen the loss of the power of what God can do through His people. Comfort ye, my people. 28 verses later, in that very same chapter. Now listen. Hast thou not known? Hast thou not heard that the everlasting God, the Lord, the Creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary? There is no searching of His understanding. He giveth power to them that are faint, to them that have no might. He increases strength. What He did He comforted. Now He's almost chastising them. He said, "Didn't you know that? Didn't you know that God is in control of?" You see, He had said, we just destroyed Jerusalem's conflict 4-5 times. But didn't you know that God is all powerful? And it's a perseverance changes to patience when you must wait upon the Lord and do it His way. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. He giveth power to the faint. It's in the book. And to them that have no might, He giveth strength. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint, because they're with God. They're with the Lord. Now, I don't know what it's going to be. I don't do that kind of thing, because God has His way. But I know it's going to be. My faith is in the power of God's dealings with His people. There is this last thing, the third observation. The first one is perseverance. Perseverance. The second one is power in the Lord's will, in the Lord's doing. And the last thing is purpose. We need to have a purpose for what we're doing. You 42 years of strength and purpose here. Look at purpose. There'll be another year of purpose, 43 and 44. Everybody has the opportunity to fulfill the will of the Lord. It isn't as strange that princes and kings and that clowns that do capers and sawdust rings and ordinary people like you and me are builders of eternity. What is going to happen will be at what God purposes through the creation that is His. I had a funeral for an elderly man way up in years. His wife had died long before him, but his daughter, he traveled with me to Europe a time or two, and his daughter was in charge of the funeral, and she was sitting by my daughter. We knew the family. He's at the back of the Blith funeral home, and she had given me something she said that was important to her, and wanted me to use it. Well, it was important to me too, so I memorized it. And this is what it said. It said that an old man traveling a lone highway came at evening cold and gray to a chasm, vast and deep and wide. The old man crossed in the twilight dim, for the chasm held no fears for him. And he paused when he reached the other side and built a bridge to span the tide. A fellow pilgrim standing near said, "Oh man, why are you building here? Your journey will end at close of day. You never again will come this way." The old man raised his head and he said, "My friend, in the path I have come today, there followeth after me a fair-haired youth who must pass this way. And this chasm which held no fears for me may to him a pitfall be. I'm building this bridge for him." That's why I continue doing what I do, hoping that somehow, some way, we're building bridges. Well, I finished, but I want to share something. Can I get another two more minutes? A minute and a half, 3 minutes. It's kind of a Mark Twainish thing, but Mark Twain didn't write it, but it's something he could have written because he loved the boats and rivers. I'm pretty sure you've never seen a four-master. The most beautiful thing I've ever seen in sea and land has been a four-master with sails all furled. I've only seen one. It was in Florida when we were passing through. It had come in. There's a story about a little fella who in up around New England had a boat harbor from Boston to Plymouth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. He never got out to the big waters, but he admired the great ships and captains, and as they came and went and came and went. And he always called to them, and they knew him, and they called to him. One came in, and he said, "Hey there, how you doing, Captain?" And the pilot stood with legs of the gumbo, megaphone under his arm, and a traditional black suit for the captains of those big magnificent ships. And he said, "This is the Bengal Lancer. We are 227 days out of port, laden with the spices of India and homeward bound." Well, there are always people there to cheer them on and cheer them on. And there's those great ships docked, and the proud sailors and captains got away. How y'all doing? This is Calvary Chapel. We are 40,721 days out of port, laden with the souls of the redeemed of God, and homeward bound. Homeward bound. Homeward bound. Homeward.